Alright guys, long time no see. Long time no see. Who would have thunk? We're in my office now. You could probably hear in the background is my robot. So give me a sec. All right, ChatGPT set up for part 2 of study session today. We're gonna hit this practice assessment hard. All right. All right. So my stream is showing something odd. I'm screen sharing, but it's only showing old stuff, I think. Let me see. Why does nothing happen on my screen? Alright, let's do... Why is this old? This is an old... There we go. Now put it in the proper layer. Nope. Let's put it there. No. There. There. Alright, so now I got YouTube. Cool. How long has that been busted? What the... I did a full stream yesterday, and it's been like back to back, and so I just now realized that what was displayed for the viewer on my end of the terminal was probably like frozen in time. So I just discovered that right now. So let's do a function check. So testing, audio 1 works. Let's do capture here. Hello, ChatGPT, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Derek. Ready whenever you are. Just let me know what you'd like to tackle first, and we'll jump right in.
A little slow, but it looks like your audio is working.
Absolutely. And no.
All right. So we'll close out that. Now, let's log in. It's no wonder my viewership rating has sucked over the last couple days for the streams. I was like, why is it busted? I'm like, I'm talking through all these different questions and stuff, and it's stuck on the same mode. Like, we hear you jumping around, and we see you on the camera jumping around, but you're screen sharing nothing. So let's first go into Bitcoin, see what's going on, price updates. It's taking a little bit of a downward trend. For the week, it's down 8%. Day, another 1%. 3 months. Let's look at 6 month trends. 6 months still doing fantastic. And then 1 year still doing fantastic. Guys, hold. I mean, this is not financial advice, but in my opinion, just hold Bitcoin for a minute. Like, just any stocks, any assets. Hold it longer for a year. Get out of that it's up, it's down, it's up and down chaos. Just hold indefinitely. You're losing so much money due to inflation, value, like pressures going into the market, that it just long-term hold for me is what my overall strategy is. Accumulate more assets, purchase when it makes sense, buy the dips whenever possible, but overall in the long term, like I ain't gonna wait for major dips to come up, because you can see like the normal swings here. I mean, these little swings would be beneficial, but they come few and far between. So just buy when it's beneficial and hold for a long time, and overall you'll see these nice little upward trends of your assets accumulating. So let's see what people are saying. Binance just started dumping BTC to liquidate all longs. Binance. They're selling Bitcoin in large quantities every few minutes. Classic exchange manipulation again. Okay.
We have cows, actually, so you don't need the cows that I have, so we can't actually money. Money is a technological advancement of commerce. 4,000 years ago, you owned a beautiful plot of land with great, beautiful olive trees, and I owned 50, maybe 70 cows. And I saw that plot of land. I said, you know what? I want that plot of land. You already have cows, actually, so you don't need the cows that I have, so we can't actually transact. So I have to go sell my cows for some pigeons because you want the pigeons. Now I come back, I bring you the pigeons. One of them dies, so I have to go back and get another pigeon. And then finally I get the plot of land. Now you have the pigeons, and you have to go figure out somebody that wants pigeons in exchange for you to get the next service or the next good. So the problem was with the bartering system, there was no ability to scale, no ability to build monopolies, because there was no ability to sustain wealth, and there's no medium of exchange that we both agreed upon. We introduced the next form of bartering, the next form of commerce, coinage. Coinage is a technological revolution. It was the first time that we all agreed upon what was something and what was the store of value. So successful merchants, kings, they began to hoard it. And they began to build treasuries. And now they began to conquer more lands because they no longer were limited by the limitations of bartering. You could take the coins, they wouldn't rot. You would sell the gold in China, you would sell the gold in India, you would sell the gold in Paris, and it would still be counted as gold. So now you had the ability for scale. The issue was now kings started realizing, hey, maybe I can shave a little bit off the top of the coin and make some new coins. And you know what? Maybe the people won't notice that I'm printing coins out of thin air. Maybe I'll add some alloy or some metal instead of the silver, diluting the currency. So they began to realize, hey, coinage now can be forged. So we need another system. Now people can no longer have their own system. We need to have something centralized. Everybody's managing on gold. The banks are holding gold. Let's get rid of the gold standard. Let's introduce paper money. Paper money, obviously, if you have, let's say, a kilo worth of gold, you can't be carrying that with your horse hanging around town. No, you have paper receipts that the bank gives you. And people began exchanging paper receipts. The receipts of what? The units of gold that were in the bank. But then the banks got cheeky and they said, you know what? Nobody's checking our bank reserves. So what if we issue more paper than we actually have gold reserves? And the French noticed. They're like, hey, these motherfucking Americans, they're printing more paper, handing it out to people than the gold that they have in the reserves. So they came in and they wiped out all the reserves, collapsing the economy. So what did they have to do? They had to introduce the gold standard. Getting rid of the gold standard. Why? Well, now we just can print as much money as we want and it's not pegged by gold. And now we were introduced with paper. And then credit cards rolled around. Yeah, I still had to go into the bank and deal with paper, but I could transact and buy things with a piece of plastic. Okay, so now digital money was introduced. But now we have the battle of what is the digital money that we want to adopt. And in these new crossroads of technological advancement, you have something that's born known as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the permissionless open ledger. Everybody knows how much of it exists, who owns what based off of, obviously you don't know who owns what wallet, but you know what wallet owns how much. Everything is open, everything is transparent, and everything is what? Peer-to-peer. It's the purest form of going back 2,000 years and transacting gold bar for gold bar in a digital format. It is the evolution of money. It is the natural evolution of money. Now you have the old system, the banking cartel, that takes a fee off of us transacting. So what is the rule or what is the need of a bank today? What is the purpose of a bank? Well, Luke, the purpose of the bank is to store your deposits. No, a bank does not hold deposits. If they hold deposits, why do they give you interest on your deposit? It's not a deposit. The moment they give you an interest on it, it's a loan. You're loaning them money, they're giving you an interest, they're taking that money, they're investing it. It's not a deposit, it's a loan. Once they give you interest, that thing becomes a liability on their balance. What you're seeing displayed on your checking account is just a record of how much the bank owes you. So the purpose of the bank isn't to hold deposits. Well, the purpose of the bank, Luke, is to fractionalize money. Well, no, that's not the purpose of the bank. It doesn't fractionalize money. Well, what's the purpose of the bank? The purpose of the bank is credit creation. It creates loans. It's in the business of buying and selling securities. So the bank is in the business of credit creation, and everything around us is getting inflated and more expensive due to the fact that we're creating credit that is being utilized to buy Louis Vuitton bags. It's not productive credit. It's not credit that adds to the GDP. We enter a situation whereby the dilution of our money becomes so big that we no longer trust it. But now we enter a very dangerous situation. If we don't have an alternative payment system, the tokenization or the programmability of digital money, like a central bank digital currency, becomes very scary. Because now they don't want to just issue the currency, they want to control the rules as to how you can use the currency. So for example, hey, Riz, you've already spent, you spent 2 hours already with the light on, now your light gets turned off because your curfew's up. And if not, we'll turn off your power bill and your cards won't work. Oh, you didn't get vaccinated? Oh, you went 5 kilometers past your house curfew? No worries, your cards just won't work. You have no freedom. Back in the day, at least you had cash, you could do whatever you wanted. So is that the system that you want? The answer is no. What is the alternative system to that digital revolution, that next advancement of money? In my opinion, is Bitcoin, digital currencies, things that are decentralized. So it's a little bit of how I've been thinking about and theorizing this idea of Bitcoin and rationalizing whether digital currencies, decentralized ones, fighting against centralized institutions are going to last. And I think people will fight for it.
It's a nice little, beautiful little video for kind of explaining the history of the money or the transactional phases of our economies of scale. So through all the different times and eras and technological revolutions, a nice little explanation of why humans throughout our societal structures are still utilizing transactions and trying to figure out ways to transact, and we're trying to economize and make it more efficient for us as things scale over time. The bartering system worked to a certain point, then we needed coinage and things like that, and now we're at a point in time where we may be in a threshold where we're needing a new paradigm, technological utilization for transacting at scale in new mediums of exchange. And that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about the history, the use case, what the technology offers us as a society. Most people look at Bitcoin or our cryptocurrencies as assets only, but they're not looking at the overall function of what it really offers us. So we'll see what happens in the future, but as Bitcoin grows and keeps gaining more and more persons utilizing it and adopting, we'll see what happens. You'll keep hearing these kind of explanations over and over and over again, kind of really bringing in more people to the use case and the benefit for them. All right, let's talk to ChatGPT. Let's set up for studying. All right. I'm looking at my Garmin health app, trying to see what the overall overall stats and progress has been. So, all right, here we are. We're glad. All right. So what we're doing here is for new audience members tuning in. I'm a student at WGU in the business management class, and I got a couple more classes left of my full term. I'm at like 94% completion, and so I got two more classes to pass and work through. These, for new people to WGU that aren't familiar, I like to be a little sales and promotional towards them. I think they're a really good program if you're looking to get a kind of a streamlined and fast-tracked college degree. If you're a kind of person that's just not sure and wants to explore and is not really fully committed to go, this might be something that's not for you. But people that are like, I want this degree because it's going to benefit me in this, this, and this. You have your specific goal in mind. You know your ROI, and you're focused, and you're also a busy person. This school may be great for you because it's all online based. It's self-paced. You work with a mentor that helps guide you and stuff, and you just kind of chunk at it whenever you're available. So it gets you out of needing to be focused and going into classroom structured work, and just gives you open curriculum, and you can pass through and complete stuff really quickly and efficiently in their curriculum if you show and present to them that you understand the knowledge. It's all based off of what you've attained through the exposure stuff. So they give you the textbook. You read through it however you want to study and attack problems. And there's different study groups. There's instructors that are available all the time that are outreaching for you. And once you feel like you're ready for the test, you can go straight to the tests. This is how I fast-tracked it. If you look over here, terms, for WGU, they break down their courses into 2 terms per year. So it's a 6-month process. Every month they cycle through students because it's all self-paced. They've gotten out of that fall, spring, and summer course structure. It's just 6 months. 6 months whenever you go through their admission process. And so like for me, I started my term for this term. Let's see if it shows a term start date. So 6/24. So probably around, here. So my term 4 started in June 1st of 2025 this year. And so you look at these time frames, middle of summer, right before Christmas is the end of my term right here. So it's like, that's not a standard kind of window operational time, but it is a 6-month course. And so after this, my next term would roll over and start December 1st. And so you can work through holidays in WGU, but it's like a lot of people take time off. And so it's all self-paced curriculum. So Here's all the courses I've completed in this batch of since June. Okay. And so you can see a lot of these I did them pretty quickly, right? Here's the course load. So I showed that I knew ethics of technology by writing an essay, and I literally 24 days after submitting starting the new term, I got 3 units completed onto my course load. Okay, so this kind of program may be beneficial for a lot of people because it's all based off of competency. So you hear that term in there, programmalized, competency-based learning. So that's what we're working on here is I have this global business environment. Okay, so over the last, let's say, since 2020, I started really getting heavy into finance discussions and podcasts and YouTube content, understanding like markets and things like that. So I've been self-teaching on the side outside of school for a while now. So I have like a pretty good knowledge set of extraction from just hearing people talk in media about markets and different dynamics of various assets and things like that. So when I'm getting into these classes, I can get into the weeds a little bit quicker because I've already have this kind of built up knowledge base. So what I like to do is a method of, because I personally believe I already have a foundation skill, so I'm going to test it. So what I like to do is when I get introduced to a curriculum, I like to just start attacking quizzes and working backwards. This is my reverse engineering methodology. Okay, so the reason I do this is for me in my career is I found reverse engineering is the better option for goal setting. If you have a particular goal in mind, whatever you want to do, understanding where your start point, end point, build the map, but then start building, okay, in order to achieve X, let's work backwards from there. So you assume in your head that you are immediately can get it done, and then you start taking actions backwards, right? So if you want to conquer something, it makes it more, it doesn't really change the process of starting from point A to point B, starting from the start point. It just makes your brain focus. Okay, this is immediately attainable. So now when I lay out a plan of action, I can work backwards of, okay, it's immediately attainable. So I already have the capacity. So when I run into problems, all I have to do is just backstep a little bit, fix it, and then I can continue to move forward almost immediately. And it helps with problem resolutions faster in your mind and executions better when you work from a reverse engineered framework. So let's get into a little bit more detail what that means. So when I started this course, I immediately just I'm like, already have spent 4 years, actually 5 years understanding markets. Okay, thousands of hours of podcasts, hundreds of hours of commuting and listening to that stuff, of self-teaching, reading books. Okay, so then it's like, well, why would I start from the curriculum? I already probably have an understanding of the terminology. So I go to the tests, okay, and then I get ready for the quizzes. Okay, and this helps streamline and pack everything because you already have the experience. A lot of people don't connect their prior experience because they just restart from ground zero. And I was like, no, start from reverse. Pick a goal, build it backwards, and utilize your experience level. And if you don't have it, like a muscle, build up. Build that muscle to what is necessary for your end goal. Okay, and if you have to take 5 steps back, take 5 steps back. So that's what we do. So what we've been doing for the last probably 3 streams on this channel has just been doing study sessions of this one quiz and just kind of unpacking all this material from the quiz extraction itself. And what I do is I set up ChatGPT to be my coach. Okay, so I rough talk through all my thoughts processes through the test, There's no time criteria, so I give a lot of context of understanding to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT helps distill my mind to the specific core fundamentals of what I need to extract and present to this college through this test. So we're trying to transmit my knowledge competency in a way that makes sense for WGU. Okay. And then, so if I need to reverse and reflect, I will go back and reverse and reflect on the material as necessary. But I love this reverse methodology. That's my method. The key to success is really reverse engineering, unpacking from end, working backwards. You can completely do it and then just start taking backwards to where you are now. So we're just going to start randomizing and testing various questions. I have study mode activated for those unfamiliar. Study mode is just started by, let's say you wanted a new conversation and you had a new topic. Hey, ChatGPT, I'm studying on herbology for a test coming up. Okay. So we're going to study for a quiz. Okay, so I've given ChatGPT some context, and then what I do next is I just hit the plus, okay, and then I go down here to more, hit study and learn, and every conversation will be queued up for this LLM model to have a more discussion revolving around coaching me for learning and education, right? With that context that I gave, the conversation styling would be different. So all outputs might be slightly different. When you're out of study mode, the conversations tend to be more direct, agreeable. It'll give you things more directly as you state it. So if you ask for a specific output, hey, tell me the answer to this, it will tell you the answer. Study mode will tell you the answer if you request it, but it'll also be like, hey, just so you know, this is how I got to here, okay? Or this is the understanding, the things that we need to unpack about it, okay? So that's what this goal is. And if you request it, you can tell it, hey, don't give me any answers, just help my understanding, coach me, okay? So you can always give it more context, but the goal of study mode is to frame things in a learning and educational conversational context. Less answers, more coaching answers, and then giving you options to break down your level of understanding in different methodologies. So that's an easy way to do it. So I'm going to go back to a prior chat because I like to work from full context. So in this chat, we have all my prior contexts of all my ramblings from prior questions, right? And it's, as you can read through these things, it's giving me coaching reports. So I was reading through a question here, talking to it. As you can tell, I have my little font. I don't waste time typing on keyboards anymore. I use Whisper Flow down here, and I activate it, and this essentially allows me to hit a control button, and now as I'm talking to you right now, it's recording and transcribing me simultaneously. So it speeds up the typing process. So you'll see me do this a lot. It's just hit the button, I'll transcribe my speech to text, and then I give it to ChatGPT, and then so it has the full dialogue of me not even missing a beat of how I talk. And so once it's synced, and so there it is, boom. Full grammar, full context. And so I can either copy and paste. So sometimes the app fails to plug in the text, so it saves you in a chat dialogue here, and then you can always migrate it back. Okay, and then as you can see, it's going to give me a response back. That is a brilliant workflow. You're basically building a live multimodal study loop. Speech to text as your front end. All right. So Did we discuss question 54 yesterday in our chat? Yes, we did. Okay, so all right, there's a basic review giving me bold of what we caught, answer we came up with, why we got there. Okay, so new question. Question 45 reads as is. A company would like to have a direct operating presence in a foreign country. The company is concerned about being exposed at the highest level of risk and a slow market entry. Which entry strategy is this company concerned about? So I've broken up these quizzes in multiple forms and tests. I've already kind of gone through this question. So for a new viewer, what this question is unpacking is a company wants to move into a new market, which is high risk and a slow moving market. What type of strategy are they implementing? And so the answers A, B, C, and D are essentially different build outs of how you can build a company. Okay, so you have, for building a business, you have different entities that can set up. That's like your LLC, your S Corp, your C Corp, a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and things like that. Okay, this isn't talking about that. Those are the legal trust structures that create a legal framework of how the company is taxed when you generate revenue. Okay, and who owns, it's a way of framing things of ownerage and taxing, of essentially making a business when I say entity, is essentially becoming a person, right? That can, the state and the sovereign can now tax. An S Corp and a C Corp, in tax purposes, is its own thing. It's like when you go to work as an employee, when you're a W-2 employee, that's your boss is paying your taxes, and they're saying, hey, I've given this person this much revenue for themselves. Now the state can tax them and the federal government can tax them, right? And so just like you have a social security card number that's tied to your taxes, and the IRS can track it. The IRS has a specific number that a business has on your W-2s. There's a EIN number, and that's essentially your business's social security identifier number for their own tax purposes that the IRS tracks. So they look at the business itself as its own thing that it taxes. Okay, so there's entities, and there's the business structure, strategy. This is talking about how you can enter a market, and there's different methodologies for entering a market. So A is a joint venture, B is subsidiary, C is acquisition, and D is talking about franchising. So to break down those couple answers, franchising is very, very popular. Think of like all the restaurant chains in America. Okay, the major fast foodies that we think of: the Carl's Jr., the Burger King, McDonald's, Panda Express. Okay, at some levels, those are referred to as franchise. Okay, and what that means is the brands got to a certain level, and what they did was they essentially built a growth structure where they sell off the use of their brand. Okay, McDonald's says, hey, pay us $20,000 and we'll help you set up your own McDonald's for a fee, right? So you pay us and you can open up your own McDonald's. You don't have to start from scratch, because that would cause IP right issues, menuing, all the things. McDonald's owns everything about McDonald's, but now they're selling a option to run your own McDonald's, own a portion of it, and utilize the brand, all the colors, the food, the same resources, the same network chain. They're selling the whole scheme You own majority of it, and then they own a portion of it with a fee. So with the added portion of giving back a fee, you can have your own McDonald's, and that's franchising. And so all these different people said, hey, I want to own a McDonald's, and I want to own a McDonald's. And so these are owned by different people. That's called franchising. Okay, acquisition is essentially the reverse of that. Instead of selling off, an acquisition is acquiring something. So you're building. I want to keep on growing, so I buy more of it. Okay, so a easy way to think of this through for the viewer, if you're new, a way of acquisition would be I buy a home, I want to move. Instead of selling off the new home or my old home to purchase the new one, I just say, hey, I want to buy a new one. Okay, so I'm now owning 2 properties. Okay, so that is an acquisition process. I'm moving from my primary residence. I'm going to move to a new residence, live there, pay the mortgage there. I now have 2 mortgages. I have 2 properties that I am legally responsible for, and then 1 or 2 of them I may rent out for an extra income, okay, to subsidize my mortgage. So that is considered an acquisition, okay. So but an acquisition kind of falls more on the business sense. So businesses can purchase multiple businesses, and they can sell off entities, and they can absorb it, and that's called an acquisition. Okay, and there's different levels of it. There's vertical acquisitions where people say, I own a manufacturing company for products. I own the logistics supply chain that manufacturing part goes through, and then I own the store that part's sold at. And then, so that's called vertical because it's going from manufacturer to customer. But then you can have like horizontal, which is you just own multiple manufacturing plants, but you never own logistics. Okay, so there's horizontal, which is kind of similar acquisitions of similar types of businesses, multiple real estate companies or multiple landscaping companies, or vertical, which is going from product to customer, or then you have all the different fractured variable, which would be like I own a manufacturing company and then I own a retail chain that are completely in different industries. All different levels of acquisitions. A joint venture is a partnership. So if I had a company in country A and I want to go to country B and do the exact same thing, but instead of doing a startup there, I want to make a partnership and create partnerships and purchase equity in a company already there. That's considered a joint. I have my legal entity business, and then I'm trying to work with them, right? We're trying to create a partnership. That's where you get the joint level from. Joint venture. It's you're working together in multiple countries. Subsidiary is the reverse of that. Similar thing. Subsidiary is I started up new here and I'm doing the exact same thing new here. So this answer is actually a subsidiary. Subsidiaries take on the highest risk with the potential of a slow moving market. And the reason is they're building the same thing all over again. I think every single time you have to start over from scratch at a new job, same thing. Company builds up a revenue source, it builds up the business on this one side, and then it says, hey, we're going to go start over here. We're going to put in a new chain in a new city or a new branch in a new market, and we're going to build up customers there from ground zero. We're going to hire employees. You're just going to take very, very heavy upfront capital costs, and there's no guarantee you're going to actually have revenue. So this is the highest level of perceived risk with a potential slow-moving market because it takes time to generate these processes to gain revenue sources. You can't just transmit very quickly for businesses. right, new question. Question 49. A senior manager from a head office of a company based in the United States is assigned to work in its overseas office in Indonesia, where significant emphasis is placed on workplace harmony. The manager ensures that the local culture and the language is understood and is often perceived as an insider who follows the normal traditions. How will the cultural dimensions of the local country influence the manager's evaluation? Okay, mouthful there. All right, so let's dissect the context. So when it comes to quizzes in business sense, I refer to various pieces of a question. And this kind of goes in the same structure. I've identified, I don't know how many pieces truly go into question design, but I've articulated it and based it into 3 different pieces of something. There is the context, which is all those additive stuff, right? The things that pad it. There is the direct question, and then there's the answers, okay? So obviously answers are easy to pick out right here. These are the bullet points. So those are the answers, okay? And then question is easy to pick out because typically it revolves around a question mark. Okay, so this the way this was written, they did us nice by separating the context to the question, and this is where, in my opinion, where it's taken a ton of practice to get used to it, of separating the different pieces. It's taken years of me of like getting through all these practice quizzes and getting used to just taking tests over and over and over again to realize that there's this practice over and over again. And so if you're a person, I sometimes struggle, particularly when I'm reading out loud. I'm better at understanding and comprehending what is read when I just shut up and read it and process it and ingest it, versus when I actually read it out loud for like the stream purposes. Oftentimes my brain shuts off and stops listening. I'm just so focused on articulating the words and saying it that I fail to comprehend. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to dissect it. So right here, so the primary question is, how will cultural dimensions of the local country influence the manager's evaluation? Okay, and so we have various answers that we can go through. I'm not going to read them just yet. I want to have a full understanding of the context. And now what context is for newer people is just, like I said, it's the padding. It's the extra stuff. So question is obviously the direct thing that the test is asking of you. Context can oftentimes be confusing to separate. It's the thing that goes into it, but doesn't necessarily need to articulate and be related to. So a lot of times on a test, you may need to filter out and separate it. It's actually hypercritical that you do in your mind. I tend to read through things to kind of get an understanding of it, to dissect of, okay, where's my context areas and what is the specific question. And once I've gotten to the question, I'll usually reread it a second time in my head to get an understanding. Okay, before I go to the answers, can I answer the question directly on the context, or do I need to go back and review and think things through? If not, then go back and review or look at answers to to cross analyze both. So we may do both. So based off of that question, I don't have enough comprehension of what is going on in the question to answer. So we're going to go back and refresh the context. So the senior manager from a head office of a company based in the United States. So let's say CEO. Keep it simple. CEO of a office from the United States is assigned to work in the overseas office in Indonesia. Okay, so he's moved right now. Don't care how long he's been there or how long this assignment is, but he's at a different office right now, where significant emphasis is placed on work harmony. Okay, they're trying to work harmony, two offices trying to be cohesive. The manager ensures that the local culture, language is understood and is often perceived as an insider who follows the normal traditions. So two competing cultures, they want to make sure that they're communicating efficiently and that they understand each other. He's ensuring them. What will the cultural dimensions of the local country influence the manager's evaluations? How will, excuse me, not what will, how will. Okay. Let's review the answers. All right, so now I have a better idea of what's going on in the context. The manager's working with Indonesia, and they're working on harmonizing the offices and the culture and making sure they're working together fairly, ethically, whatever. There's that stuff I've implied into it, but it's not explicitly stated. All right, question A. Now, my best approach, since the question is odd, so essentially the approach I would like to do here is I'm going to, in my head, kind of read through all the answers and kind of do a comparison analysis to the question. That style of question, I would assume, is going to lead to a very vague, partially vague answer, or something that's subjective or interpolative or extrapolative. It's not going to be direct A plus B equals C kind of resolution. So we might have to kind of think things through of how people tend to interact or businesses operate. So A is the senior manager would be given a very favorable performance evaluation, possibly for doing this assignment. This is possible. I don't know the full thing that's going on in this business, but that's a possibility. The local employees would refuse to evaluate the performance of an apparent manager. Possibly. What it's meaning by here is refuse to evaluate the performance. This is, I think, a term for saying an outsider, right? So they don't want to evaluate him. Okay. C, local employees would have difficulty understanding the process and language of the evaluation. I don't think so. Because at this level, I would assume this evaluation is going to be written down. And if it's written down, it should be easily translatable in today's society. Now, the gray area is subjective. Kind of the human skills may be blurry, but the evaluation process should be relatively simple. D, the senior manager would be given a very harsh performance evaluation. Hard to say. Again, it's not stating by who. Who would be giving the harsh performance evaluation here? It's just we're trying to focus on the cultural dimensions of the local influence. So A and D are two polar opposites of talking about the same thing. Senior management would be given a favorable performance evaluation or a harsh performance evaluation. Hard to say without any further context in there, so I think those answers are less favorable for this context of question. So now let's focus on B and C. B talks about employees refusing to do the evaluate, and then C talks about difficulty understanding the process and language of the evaluation. Both in the real world, I think, are highly probable. But for quiz questions and like test designs, typically, I found in practice, picking the most likely or the blatantly obvious, or getting out of the gray area of what real life complexities would do, is the easiest form. So we have to kind of parse this. It's not giving any context of the company having any bad blood. So I don't think employees would have any problem doing the evaluation. Okay. So I think the most likely choice would be employees having difficulty understanding the process and the language. Okay. I know I talked about in today's society, this should be relatively simple, but because of no further extra context implied, because the quiz context doesn't show any context of bad blood within the companies, they're just showing that they're harmonizing efforts, and then we're focusing on cultural problems and language. Language is a cross use in context and the answer, so I'm going to go with C. ChatGPT, let me know how I worked that through in my head. All right, let's unpack your reasoning and tighten the key link to MOSFET's cultural dimensions, since that's what the question is testing underneath all the story details. All right, so we get to learn what this is. What is the question? What the question is really probing. Indonesia scores high on collectivism, low individualism, and high on power distance. That means people value group harmony, respect for hierarchy, and avoid direct confrontation or criticism. Evaluating a superior, especially an outsider, can feel disrespectful or uncomfortable. So the hidden variable in this question is how cultural norms affect feedback in evaluation behavior. Correct answer would be B. Local employees would refuse to evaluate the performance of a expatriate manager. Here why. Because harmony and respect for authority are highly valued. Local staff would likely avoid evaluating a manager. The reason your reasoning was 90% there. You recognize it was about cultural influence, and you're correct narrowing it to B versus C. The final step was just an anchor in collectivism and power distance. Two dimensions that explain why the evaluation process becomes socially awkward rather than linguistically confusing. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, because I didn't have that underlying principle in my thinking process. So yeah, thank you for that explanation. I didn't have that underlying principle of collectivism, or a problem with, or like a strong respect for authority in that culture. I guess I went more of cultural differences of having a rougher understanding in language and stuff. So that's why I leaned that direction. But so having an understanding of this culture here head on early on was probably more beneficial in this question. All right, so if that style of question comes back up, it is likely that they would only change a few keywords in the test. So let's just create what simple batch and easy to understand countries would kind of fall in line with that principle that you're talking about. So for like pre-assessment in a test like this, typically what I've seen is at this point with WGU is they don't branch far from the pre-assessment. So for heavy context, like scenario-based contextual related questions, if it's heavy, typically it's almost the same. If it's math-based, it's almost the same scenarios. What's the terminology? Just different like numbers. So they want to make sure that you know how to do the math problem. So if they've already pre-programmed the quiz to reflect what you're going to see. Okay, now stuff like this, where it's more textbook, parse a scenario, or pick a specific category or a keyword or something like that. Typically, they might dance around a little bit, but not far. So that's why I typically like to go long-winded in all the answers, because it's likely that they can give a very similar based question but describe a different part of the answer sets. So like they'll almost give me the same answers, but it'll be talking about something different. Like when I was talking about dual venture, subsidies, franchising, and that one, the reason I went so heavy into all the different explanations is because that kind of form of question is highly likely that they would simply just change a little bit of keywords to get me to point to a different answer overall, versus questions like that last one, they might just change the country name. So it's hard to state. You have to kind of use your best practices, maybe look online of what WGU does typically from what people say they do differently from pre-assessment to assessment. What's the general consensus of how much does it branch away? So, okay. For this scenario, okay, high power distance / collectivist country list. East and East Asia, China, Japan, South America. Okay, yeah, I see that. Yeah, Middle East, yeah. Latin America, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, and then the lower power individualist, for contrast, would be U.S., Canada, Australia, U.K., Netherlands. So, kind of like heavy in Europe, Australia, New Zealand. I wouldn't say. So the heavy European influenced historical countries. So that kind of seems to be the pattern there. So, like the U.S. is a mixing pot today, but Canada and the U.S. have stem like economically heavy from the UK structures. Yes, Spain influenced South America, so that's why there is a slight difference there. That's why Latin Americas are a little bit warmer because of the European influence. But yeah, if you track the chain, okay, so Middle East, East Asia, Southeast Asia areas tend to be heavy collective, high power distance in ranking order. Okay. And then European influenced or European historical setup. That's why Australia is not even near Europe, but historically how its economy was set up and its nation, it stems from Europe. Cool. All right, moving on to question 58. Which form of funding requires a low cost of capital and does not require time to mature? So this one's nice. There's no extra context. It's just a direct question style question. All right, which form of funding requires low cost of capital and does not require time to mature? Okay. Just thinking through those things, where I'm leaning, they might be leaning towards would be some kind of more liquid capital base, because the cash, things like cash, because when you're looking at it as a capital, like assets or things that are ROI asset heavy typically need time to mature, and things like that. So low cost to capital would be something liquid that has a low interest rate applied to it. Now that's just my early thoughts, summing from my just gut instinct thought process of what that question is kind of looking for in the phrasing without going over the answers. So A is equity shares, B is bonds, C is loans, and D is angel investments. Now to break all that apart to compare it to the question, equity shares is just selling off shares within the corporation. So early stage startups will sell off equity shares to the early employee base to incentivize them to work with their company if they feel like they're at an opportunity to go public soon, or at early stages of being in public offering. For they will sell off as a benefit. So it's on top of your base pay, you have actually offered ownership into it. So this is typically happens at upper echelon levels of the management within the corporation, the CEOs, the CFOs, the CTOs, and stuff like that. So what that means is those are those department level head positions that get offered ownership to on top of their high level of potential salary earnings. It offsets, so these guys can make even more money when the company goes public, and if it makes a heavy increase in overall wealth, these people not only do they increase typically on salaries, benefits, bonuses, and things like that, but these people also are receiving in their shares that they own, they're also getting value from that too. Bonds. So equity shares is literally just a stock, but it's just a terminology applied to people that work within the company. They're being offered stock within the company that they work in. Bonds. Bonds is just from nation to nation. Bonds does take a time to mature, so I don't think it goes into this question. Bonds is just you're purchasing cash later at the expense of cash today. So here's $5 to the government. They're going to give you $5 and 3% back. So they're going to give you whatever that 3% back at this set duration of time. So you need to wait for the time to mature before you're getting paid back. So bonds have mature dates. So that's out because this question is referring to does not require time to mature. Equity shares typically don't. Well, it depends on how long they hold the shares for. Typically, people that offered equity shares, they don't sell. They can, but they typically wait. But shares does require a maturing time because if you're offered shares in an early startup, why would you sell first stage when Facebook's on its 1 million user when it's going to hit several billion later? So that's the kind of scenario. So it does take time to mature. Loans are simple, easy to understand. Mortgages, credit cards. Angel investment. Angel investment is very similar to loans, but it's a separation. You can angel investing it's like the reason it's using that term, it's like you're bringing up someone to fruition. So you have an early stage startup and you're looking for more capital to derive revenue and grow within the company. So you need investors to bring you capital to bring in as assets so you can utilize that capital to gain more revenue. But at the expense, typically there's different ways of that capital. Angel investing, it could be a direct loan and it could have a payback time. Typically, angel investing is actually the process of making a company set up for public offering. at the expense of public offering. Like we will give you this capital, but you're going to offer us shares, and we're gonna set this whole thing up so it's publicly offered. We're gonna own shares. Here's your offering, and that comes into the capital pool. So there's a whole process to it. So which one matches the criteria in the question? I would say C, loans. Low cost of capital and does not require time to mature. Typically is very fast. Loans can be paid back in a long time duration, but based off of it absolutely needs it. No, typically loans typically when you want a loan, you want a low interest rate. So that's your low cash on your money of what your payback. So that's typically what we are looking for as purchasers of a loan, is like we want the lowest interest rate because that's part of the system. Yep. Cool. All right, I'm gonna pause here, use the restroom, and then I need to make a phone call, and then I'll be back. All right, I'm back. All right, ChatGPT. Question 39. This one's actually going to be similar to the... This is exactly what I was talking about. A question that kind of quizzes on the other related answers. So question 39. A company wants to hold a direct operating presence in a foreign country, so it buys a company in the target country and runs the operation. Which type of business agreement is this company using? So the one that talked about the strategy, yeah. So this one, it wants to have a presence. So it buys a company in the target country and runs the operation. That is a, well, you can't, well, what was the other one? The acquisition. So I would say it's licensing and joint venture, but it's not joint venture because it's not talking about operations. So I would say licensing, C. All right. After a long-winded phone call, I am back. What's going on here? Refresh that. All right, so ChatGPT's explanation, you're catching the pattern perfectly. This is the one on the mirroring image question designed to check whether you can spot the difference between modes of entry when just a few words have changed. So let's slow it down one step. A company wants to hold a direct operating presence in a foreign country, so it buys a company in the target country and runs the operation. So the company isn't just selling its products abroad, it acquires a company that already exists there. Then it runs that company directly. Yes. So, yes, I am inclined to agree. Acquisition does make sense, but acquisition is actually not in the answer set for this question. So, in the parentheses, I'm going to give you what the question is and answers are. It's literally the options is A, joint venture, B, subsidiary, C, licensing, and D, franchising. Licensing and franchising is literally a stone's throw of the same thing. So yes, I agree that acquisition would make the most sense for this question, but they didn't even give it as the answer. So now we have to fill in a gap now, essentially, for what would be the most likely now that they've taken it out. As you can tell, they took out acquisition out of this answer. So we need to go with another explanation. I agree. Acquisition makes the most sense. That's the way I would understand it. That was my first thinking. And then when you read through, you're just like, where's acquisition? Why is that not in here? And I'm looking through. It's like I definitely can't really reasonably justify these other options for this because it's most referring to an acquisition in the context. So I'm at a loss of how we can answer this question. So help me out here. All right. So since I'm not really weak in this area, I'm just jumping around randomly. Question 48. Which national cultural dimension in global business refers to people's inclination to take care of themselves and their close circle of family and friends, often at the cost of the whole society? This is kind of getting close to that power distance thing you were talking about, When you have a shorter power distance, you have a more, what was the term? Less socially divergent culture, like we were speaking about Southeast Asia, Asian cultures, Middle East, and stuff like that. I'm not quite sure what the full terminology was, but it is less. What is it? Populism? Would it be populism? I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. But this one is referring to the opposite spectrum. So the ones that take care of themselves, close circle of friends, family, but then at the whole cost of the sun. So A is referring to A is uncertainty avoidance. B is long-term orientation. C is individualistic, and D is power distance. I like C and D. Power distance is referring to, in this context question, but I'm leaning more towards C because of it is inherent individualism, but it's not, because it's incorporating family and friends. Power distance, I'm not we might have to kind of further separate those terms. They seem to be close, but not really the same thing. Long-term orientation is a goal-setting process. Uncertainty avoidance is a process of avoiding risk. So those A and B are completely unrelated to the context question. So now we're down to C and D. I like C the best. I think but let's work through D as well. Let's work through an understanding of D and further clarify, so we can figure out further details on how to reasonably answer it if it comes up. Okay, so the core difference is they're both personality types, but they're distinguishing something different. Individualism is held internally for the person. It is a more inclined to a personality trait. A person with high individualism looks at themselves, focuses on themselves, can be a little bit of a narcissist, versus collectivism is the personality trait to want to hold more collective values versus individual values. Power distance is, like you stated, the authority, speaking to authority more. To further separate it, individualism and collectivism, we can get away from the authority level. A highly individualistic society is a is when you count the scope and breadth of people and how they think and how they look at values, you're going to see more diversities of thought. That's kind of or self-expression. That's kind of more inclined to what the individualism entails. It's more individualistic, non-shared collective thought. There might be crosses over, but when you kind of query or speak to people, you're going to see a lot of diverse appearances, a lot of diverse trains of thought. The appearance and the structures, they may commingle, but they're not always agreed upon. So every person, they can say, oh, I'm a Christian. You can have two Christians, but they can completely believe in two different forms of Christianity, or may self-express, or different hobbies, or maybe come from different family backgrounds. So this is more individualism versus collectivism. Shows that there's going to be more inherent collective relationships. So if people come from a particular ethnic background, they may share the same familiar family structures, the same social hierarchical structures, the same authorities, the same forms of thought. That starts blending into the realm of collectivism and individualism. Less robust, diverse, outward opinions of thought. They might have kind of a shared thought process and may be more internal in their thought process versus less vocal, where individualism is kind of key. Now, power distance speaks to the view of authority, how likely or closely to conformity people are with authoritation or authority processes. Am I understanding and reasoning through this properly? I'm sure in this test, it's primarily going to be related to low and high power distance. So power distance in the term can be either low or high. It's a scale. It's like it's a referring to authority. In the sense of this question or the way you're framing it, you're typically related to cultures? Can it branch to actual companies? Because one thing that kind of highlights to me, I was a low power distance style person operating in a high power distance environment when I was in the military, right? That's why a lot of things that in my head had oftentimes conformity clash, even though I did figure it out and learned how to operate within it. I oftentimes struggled because I liked things to be a little bit more one-on-one, to be at a closer relationship dynamic to my superiors when I operate than in a high-power environment of keeping things respectful, title-based, and stuff like that. I oftentimes got a lot of debates and arguments there. So does power distance apply to businesses, or is it just a kind of a more social phenomenon applied and looked at and defined as a social phenomenon as a collective? Kind of like at a national level versus a more individual or a small organization. Cool. So it does apply to both. So, okay. So when you hear power distance, think authority principles, thinking of things in simple terms, versus individualism. Collectivism is social principles. They're both social dynamics, but individualism, collectivism has to do with self-expression and decision making, like you said, versus power distance. It's a sliding scale. They're both individualism and collectivism is actually part of the power distance process. So it's kind of it's the two separate sides. It's the two separate isms of the same kind of process. But it gets... But it also gets a little bit more dynamic and diverse as well, or micro-focused when you're actually talking about what is individualism and what is more specifically collectivism, where power distance speaks solely to power of authority and how the community or the entity or the person or the measure of the scale of the group thinks of authority and it relates to it. Question 31. A company would like to expand its corporate social responsibility (CSR) initiatives to a global level. Which strategy would the company use to meet this goal? A. Provide city charities with the funds to continue community activities. B. Improve manufacturing processes for local workers. C. Invite high school students to the company headquarters to explore careers. And D. Engage stakeholders on the issue of air quality. A lot of things to go on and process there. So if your goal as a corporate social responsibility initiatives but you want to be at a global level. So corporate social responsibility. That's the key words. What falls into corporate social responsibility initiatives? Okay, so engage with stakeholders on the issues of air quality. Yes, that's a good thing to think about. It's not related to social responsibility necessarily. It is an environmental issue, but that implies and works into social issues, but that's focusing on an environmental issue. So I don't think that one's related. Especially it doesn't give you further context of which air quality, where. It's just kind of very vague. So I'm going to X this one out. Invite high school students to the company headquarters to explore careers. That's a very narrow focus. That's a nice thing to do. It is. But if you're trying to incorporate at a global level, there should be more terms in that statement to look at inviting high school kids throughout the globe to work at the company as a whole. So it's not being very global level based, but it is a nice initiative. I think that would be helpful. So I give that one a B. Improve manufacturing processes for local workers. Okay, so that's, again, at a global level, that's good. That is actually socially responsible behavior. I would give that a B+. It does the most good over the one that's talking about high school behaviors. I think it impacts more people, so we can say it does do better at a global level for social responsibility. So I would give that one a B+. But I'm not quite sure it's there for an A or to get us there at the right answer. Let's talk about A. Provide city charities with the funds to continue community activities. This is, again, a very narrow focus. So stakeholder and air issue. Yes, bad. Air quality bad, but it impacts the environment. First, directly. Okay, so I like to work in the most direct yes answer in these weird, oddly trying to make stretch of tangents and correlations. Okay, so we're trying to find the most direct formulation process. So to provide city charities with the funds to continue community activities, yes, good corporate social responsibility, but it doesn't continue to state how that impacts communities at a global level. If you're just giving a city, provide city charities. The keyword city, so a singular city, right? So that's very micro focus, so not a global level. So I think improving manufacturing for workers probably has the most effect. But then if you just focus on global level, air quality at the same time. So that's really, what are your thought processes? I try to focus on the first context first, but we need both to hit both processes, social responsibility and a global level. So if we think of it through, it could be D. D has the strongest global level. But to me, it's non-correlated social responsibility. Okay, so we're talking about a means or a method or an outcome that is looking to be social, ethical, and environmental impacts of its operation at a global level. So it needs to kind of meet those kind of 4 criterias, fall into those lanes: social, ethical, environmental. So I like the addition to environmental. It's starting to lean towards D now again. I gotta pause, make a phone call again. All right, I am sorry. All right, ChatGPT, I'm sorry. I will never leave you again. All right, anyone hanging out? Nope. Quiet stream, this one. No one likes studying? I had more audience involvement in my chores than studying and playing around with AI and talking about money. Odd. All right, so this question talked about, let's break it down. All right, let's break it down. This is the last question. I got to go take a break and go pick up my kids and end the stream here for the day. So A, provide city. Let's break that. Okay, I like the table. I really like that breakdown for it. Two simple things. We're looking for social responsibility and global scope. And you need we need an and logic answer. So an and for non coding or digital frameworks. There's different tables. If you follow my cursor here on the screen, okay. So let's just build an imaginary table around these inputs, okay. And we'll call these inputs. So they're buttons. We'll call them buttons, inputs, okay. So in a gate is just a digital framework of a way to make a decision to make a positive or true output, okay? So you have two buttons, button 1 and button 2, okay? So typically there's a typical decision-making process for the inputs. So for an AND gate, to produce a positive output, you need to press both inputs or all inputs. AND implies all the inputs need to be met, okay? So button 1 and button 2 need to press for a positive true output. So that's the kind of output we're looking for in this question. The opposite gate that happens in digital, and I know I wave my hands a lot in front of the camera. Just mind you, if you're new to my channel, I am learning ASL because my daughter's nonverbal, so I'm a hands talker now. I've always been one, but I still articulate. I haven't learned all the gestures, but I still do a lot of hands talking now. So just bear with me. That's how I talk now. So an OR gate is one or the other. So if you were making, let's say, apply this to the button logic. If you press button 1, you get a true, right? A light bulb might go on. True means a lot of different things in digital logic, but a true in binary logic, Boolean logic, it's 0 or 1. 1 can be measured as a positive voltage. 0 is measured in a negative voltage or no voltage at all. Right? So let me show you a simple example of a true statement. If I hit this switch up, light would go on. There it is. Boom. Switch on, true, positive voltage. Switch off, off. So it gives you two sides of decision logic. Okay? So OR gates, you could press either or of the inputs. So this table we're looking at my cursor, right? We're looking for a piece of the question, right? Question 1, A, B, C, and D needs to have both button inputs to create a true statement for this logic, okay? That's what we're looking for. A company would like to expand its corporate responsibility initiatives to a global level. So separate the lines there, to a global level, and focusing on doing core social responsibility. Okay, so if we broke it down, which strategy would the company use to meet this goal? So now you start breaking down A, B, C, and D. So the action of providing charity funds is a social responsibility. Cool. but is at a local level only, providing city charity funds. Nice community work. So as it says in the comment, nice community work, but not global. B, local manufacturing for local workers. Again, ethical labor, great, only local site. Helps social welfare, but not domestic scale. So it's not broad to a global reach. Okay, last one. Invite high school students to HQ. Great educational outreach. Single site. Only the HQ and only those being invited to the HQ. Purely local reach. So now you have engage with shareholders to make sure we fix air quality. Okay? And it's applied because it's vague right now. Because air quality is so moving, we can't like isolate it to a specific area. It's implied that improving air quality helps everyone around, and particularly the overall dynamics of the environment, because it's the first thing to move and moves fast. Okay, so it's going to affect the globe, the overall air quality. So yes, that is a good social reform, and it has global reach. So that's the and logic. So all these would fall if we were looking for or logic, we could say that these are all true as well. But we're not. Both inputs are not met. You need both in an and logic. So because we have A and B here, we can say that D reasonably fits this criteria for this question. All right. We're going to end streaming there. It's been a fun little day. For those who have tuned in for me, it's been a nice little day. I pretty much have been streaming for hours at this point. Going over here. This individual stream has been 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I think my cleaning session before was about 2 hours and 30 minutes too. So we've been total for about 5 hours of streaming. This is my first time ever going this far. So thanks for tuning in, anyone. And I hope we learned something. I know you saw me silence the screen. I'm relatively new to streaming. I'm having a blast doing it, but I try to not openly promote other people's stuff. So like when my buddy Bobby called, I wasn't going to have him on stream. He's a funny guy. I'm sure he would have no problem on it, but he has no idea what's going on in the background. So I don't want him to have a problem with it. So I had to close out the conversation for a brief while that phone call happened. So that happened for a little bit. But thanks for stopping by, hanging out. I hope you guys